Our guest this morning has inspired readers and audiences around the world with his inspiring talks and the more than 26 books he's authored, including 5 for children. His principles have been put to the test by numerous NFL, NBA, MLB coaches and teams, Fortune 500 companies, school districts, hospitals, and nonprofits. He is the author of The Coffee Bean, The Energy Bus, Soup, The No Complaining Rule, Training Camp, and The Carpenter. He and his tips have been featured on The Today Show, CNN, Fox and Friends, and in numerous magazines and newspapers. His clients include the Atlanta Falcons, LA Clippers, Pittsburgh Pirates, Campbell's Soup, Wells Fargo, Northwestern Mutual, Publix, Southwest Airline, Bayer, West Point Academy, and more. He's no stranger to the 21st Century Business Forum, as he brilliantly hosted the series in its first year and a half. Now he's back with us as a guest to share his wisdom. Welcome, John. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us again and on the other side of this conversation. All right, John, let's start at the beginning. You know, a lot of people watching may not know that you weren't always Mr. Positive. Let's talk a little bit about that transformation and how you flipped the switch, so to speak.
Well, I like to say I grew up in Long Island, New York, in a Jewish Italian family, a lot of food, a lot of guilt, a lot of wine, a lot of whining. So it was not easy to be positive growing up in my family. My dad was a New York City police officer and he was undercover narcotics. So he was shot a few times. He wasn't very positive, a very loving man, but just one of the most negative guys on the planet. And so I think I got some negativity ingrained in me. And in my late 20s, about 30, 31, I really struggled with negativity, depression. I lost my job during the dot-com crash, didn't know how we were going to pay the bills. I had 2 small children. My marriage was crumbling. I was not a great husband. I was young, immature, and honestly, I was falling apart. And my wife had had enough of my negativity. She said, I love you, but I'm not going to spend my life with someone who makes me so miserable. Like, you need to change. And I really did need to change. And it was a great wake-up call at a young age. And I began this journey of working to become a more positive person. I started to research all the ways that I could be more positive. This was during the emerging field of positive psychology. So I was studying ideas, I was practicing them. And then I started a newsletter where I would share my ideas and started getting some readers. And that's honestly what led me to do this work right now as a writer and speaker years later. So my greatest challenge became an opportunity to be a better leader, a better person, and also a teacher who now teaches positive leadership. But it's not natural for me. And I tell my audiences all the time, I'm not Mr. Rah-Rah, Mr. Positive. Like, this is real. This is optimism. This is belief. This is someone who has to really work at it. But I think that's what made me a good teacher, because I've had to work at it so much. And I know what it takes to be better, be more positive, and be a better leader.
Let me lean in on that just a little bit, because I think it's such an interesting point, that I do think there is as much effort in being positive as there is in being negative. And you're right. I mean, I think personally, you run into it where people are like, you're always so up, and it's like, no, you have to work at that, because there are mornings you get up and you're not feeling it, but you have to get yourself there. So kind of talk through that a little bit, like the work ethic of staying positive, because in these times we live in, it does take effort to be optimistic.
I always say that this is not Pollyanna positive. This is not about seeing the world through rose-colored glasses. This is knowing that you have the power to overcome the thorns. This is not about ignoring reality. It's about maintaining optimism, belief, and faith in order to create a better reality. And it's not about sugarcoating situations. Like, you could say, hey, this stinks. This isn't good. This is a tough time we're dealing with. But we're not going to allow negativity to sour our situation. We're going to find a way forward. We're going to have the resilience and the grit to keep on going. And here's the thing. You have to feed yourself every day in order to feed others. If you don't have it, you can't share it. So every day we do have to wake up. We do have to feed ourselves. We have to feed others in the process. I always say you can rise and shine or rise and whine. What kind of day do you want to have? Rise and shine or rise and whine? And there have been many days, I should say, where I rose and whined, and it wasn't a good day. So what I have found is that when you don't feel very positive, that's when we need to call on our bigger purpose. We have to remember our purpose that will give us something to be positive about. Your purpose will drive your positivity. Why are you here? What difference can you make? How can you serve? How can you help others? That purpose will drive your positivity, because when we wake up and we don't feel very positive, we have to find that extra energy, that greater power, that greater strength to keep on moving forward. And for me, it's about how can I make a difference? How can I encourage others? And I find when I'm encouraging others, I'm feeling better myself. Do you know when you smile, you produce more serotonin in your brain? But here's the other thing. The recipient of your smile also produces more serotonin. So when you smile at them, you're giving them an antidepressant. Think about that. Whatever your job is, you're also a pharmacist. I bet you didn't know that.
No. Well, leadership is such a big thing in companies and in the life of an individual. What's the biggest challenge in leadership today? And how do you advise addressing whatever that challenge is?
Well, I would say right now, a huge challenge seems to be the exhaustion that people feel, the pessimism that people feel. People are really tired based on the last few years. So as leaders, positive leadership is now more important than ever. I am more convicted than ever in the power of positive leadership. I just came from Snapchat. They're now called Snap. And Evan Spiegel is the founder and the CEO. He brought me to speak there in 2017. This was when they were really struggling. Their stock price was $4 a share. And he told me, hey, they were at a crossroads. And he read my book, The Power of Positive Leadership. And I went there to speak on that. But on my way there, I'm thinking, okay, these are some of the smartest people on the planet. What am I going to talk about? So I said, Evan, do you want me to talk about the cost benefits analysis of positivity? You want me to share the latest research and data in terms of optimism and belief? He said, John, Instagram is coming after our business. Wall Street is beating us down. The marketplace is crushing us right now. Just help us stay positive. And so I shared some principles for positive leadership. They really embraced it. So now here I am, 2022, now speaking to his 150 global leaders. They have grown to like 5,500 employees. They grew several thousand people during the pandemic. Their stock price is $45 a share. And he said to me before this talk, John, you came at such a crossroads for us. You introduced us to positive leadership. We really embraced it because there was so much negativity. Some people rolled their eyes. They were like, yeah, whatever, positivity, what's that? Come on, business and positivity. He said, but a lot of people really embraced it. We hired people that embraced it. He said it was a game changer for us. And now I want you to introduce this to our 150 global leaders so that they can lead this way going forward. So I believe one of the biggest challenges we have today is that negativity and pessimism that every organization, every team deals with. And you've got to lift your people up. You got to encourage them. And I'm not talking about rah-rah. This is not rah-rah leadership. This is conviction and passion and purpose and mission. Great leaders lead with a vision and mission. Where are we going? And why are we going there? They have a telescope and a microscope. Telescope, big picture vision, plus the why, the purpose. We don't get burned out because of what we do. We get burned out because we forget why we do it. So remember our why. When you know your why, you will know the way. And we have this vision that we're working towards. And then we have this zoom focus, this microscope, where we are taking action every day. We are controlling what we control. We are winning today. We can't control out of the circumstances. There are a lot of challenges out there, but we show up every single day focusing on that. And I think we've learned over the last 2 years, we have to adapt. We have to innovate. We have to win today and find a way forward through the challenging times. Brandon Landry, who owns Walk-Ons, I'm sure you know who he is. Yeah. I had him on my podcast, and we talked about how during the pandemic, what they had to do, how they had a smaller footprint in their stores. They're now building smaller restaurants as a result of that, but they also did a lot of catering. And by really focusing on winning each day, they did like 93% of their sales in the middle of COVID in 2020, just as they did in 2019. And that's a testament to positive leadership, to a company that says, we're not going to allow the circumstances to define us. We're going to define our circumstances. So the challenges that we face is ripe now for leadership that encourages, that believes, that points the team forward. Can't look back. Stop looking back. We've got to look forward to what we're creating right now.
You just said when you know your why, you know your way. That's so interesting. Tell me about that.
Well, purpose drives everything that you do. So great teams have a shared vision and mission, right? Every organization today seems to have a mission statement, but only the great ones have people who are on a mission.
Hmm.
So when you know that mission and you know your why, you will know the way. You're going to know the way of where you're going. And you'll also find ways around the obstacles that are in your way. And so, okay, here's our purpose. Here's our vision. This is what we stand for, right? I know we stand for. I know my why. Well, now I know the way forward. If I'm an educator and I'm a school, I know that I have to stand for those students. And that's why we exist, right? If we exist to save lives as a company, I will do whatever it takes to save lives. And I know that putting people's safety first is the key to what I must do in my job. So it's always about what is my purpose? Why do I exist? And sticking to the core of that. I think so often we get distracted and there's a lot of things that come our way that is not part of our purpose. It seeks to clutter us and keep us from what matters most. So we focus on what is urgent instead of what matters. And what I'm saying is every day, focus on what matters. What is your purpose? And that will drive your path forward. And you'll know the way you're supposed to go as a result of that.
You know, talk to me about the positive leadership challenge. And I've heard you say that optimism is a competitive advantage. Tell me about that.
Well, we do a positive leadership challenge where we take people through a challenge. It's a free thing we do, and they go through a 7-day, 1-a-day activity exercise where you just have to be a positive leader doing one thing every day. It might be writing a thank you note. It might be picking one person you're going to encourage on your team, connecting with one person, right? Great leaders connect with those that they lead. So you don't just communicate, you connect and you develop that relationship. And when you have a greater connection, it leads to a greater commitment. Everyone wants a committed team, but you'll never have commitment without connection. So your job as a leader is to connect with those that you lead and garner and generate that greater commitment. And so when you do that, you start to see how these actions of positive leadership impact your team. Positive leadership is not just a state of mind that makes you feel better. It's a state of action that makes the people around you better. And I know this, being positive doesn't just make you better. It makes everyone around you better. So the challenge is about experiencing that. And it's about showing the impact that you can have on others by doing simple, small things each day, one a day for 7 days. And you'll see the impact of your positive leadership.
That's interesting. It leads me to a question for someone who is not naturally optimistic or positive. What can they actively or passively do to be more optimistic in their day?
Great question. So one thing that I've done that has been a game changer for me, it's the most important thing I've done. It's had the biggest impact on my life. Years ago, I read that you cannot be stressed and thankful at the same time. So if you're feeling grateful, if you're feeling blessed, you will not feel stressed. And so every day I started to take this walk of gratitude. And it was like a 10-minute walk. Sometimes it was 30 minutes. And while I'm walking, I'm just saying what I'm grateful for. And the research shows when you do that, you are flooding your brain with these positive emotions that uplift you rather than the stress hormones that slowly drain you and over time will slowly kill you. So think about that. You're taking this walk every day. You're weeding the negative, feeding the positive. The garden of your mind starts to look better and better the more you do it. And you create a fertile mind that is ready for great things to happen. So that walk every day, I literally rewired my brain from negative to positive. Mm-hmm. Leaders can also look at every challenge as an opportunity. So you're going through a challenge. Okay, what can we learn from this? How can we grow from this? What is this teaching us now? And what actions do we need to take going forward? As a leader, you embrace change. Positive leaders, they embrace it. They don't resist it. And when you embrace change, you're able to ride the wave to a successful future. We could study organizations and companies during the Great Recession, during the Great Depression. You will find those that thrive are the ones that embraced the change they were confronted with. Those that complained and resisted it, they got crushed by the wave. So just by embracing it as a leader and helping your team embrace it, you develop a mindset of resilience, of grit, of adaptability that allows you to innovate, find a way forward, and then have success on the other side of change. So here's the thing. We all love what change produces. We just don't like going through the change. We actually like change. We just don't like transition. And so you and your team, when you're going through the transition, have to stay positive through the transition to ultimately create the great change you're going through. Whether it's a new software, update that you have to do, or you're moving to a new CRM application, which always seems to get a lot of companies, whatever it may be, or a new pricing structure, whatever you're going through, right? Or reorg, whatever it is, it's about how do we embrace it and how do we move forward? And that's the leadership. You set the tone. You drive the culture as a leader. And it's probably something we should talk about from a challenge standpoint. I want all great leaders to know that you drive the culture of your team. And it's your most important job is to create the culture. And once you do, what happens is you have a team, an organization that invests in the root of your culture, of your organization. And when you invest in the root, you get a great supply of fruit. If you have a team and organization that's always focused on the stock price, the numbers, the wins and the losses, and you focus on that and you ignore the root, and you focus on the fruit, the tree dies. And we see that so often in tough times, right? When we start to have a recession, a depression, inflation, we start to see the great resignation. Who's leaving, right? Who's leaving? People are leaving companies where they don't have strong cultures and great leadership. I work with the Rams and Sean McVay since Sean McVay got the job as a head coach. We met, he was 30 years old. And I was like, wow, this young guy is unbelievable, off the charts. We met for like 5 hours. We talked about leadership. We talked about culture. I helped him build his framework on what his culture was going to be. And he told me point blank, I want it to be about we, not me. Like we have to be a we culture, not a me culture. Well, here we were going towards the Super Bowl. And I watched Odell Beckham Jr. He literally is on the sidelines. They're playing the 49ers. They're winning the game. And he's on the sideline saying, we, not me. We, not me. And when I saw that clip, I said, okay, what Sean built 5 years ago was now being ingrained in him, he came on the team in the season, like the 10th game in the season. And now he was ingrained in the culture. It was so strong that culture drove that talent towards greatness. And you see that over and over again with great cultures. And it's why they won a Super Bowl. A play here, a play there, right? They don't win the Super Bowl. It was we, not me. But that was defined early on and it was reinforced. It was lived. They brought in people that actually believe that live that. And it was an incredible, incredible culture and team dynamic. And you see it firsthand. Same thing in organizations. That culture doesn't happen overnight. You got to live it and breathe it every single day.
Well, I must say, as a moment of personal privilege, as a lifelong 49er fan, it's your fault that we didn't get this done. So, I'm going to hold that against you now, John. Let's talk a little bit about culture, because you've said that culture is not static, it's dynamic, and it's got to be built every day. Where do most companies get this wrong?
Great question. Well, they believe it is static. It's not dynamic. They don't realize that every day they are creating their culture by what they think, by what they say, and by what they do. And culture is the living, breathing essence of what an organization values, believes, thinks, says, and does. That's how I define culture. And once you know that's what your culture is all about, your values, your beliefs, your thoughts, what you say, and what you do, your actions, every day you're creating your culture, and everyone in the organization is creating the culture. Where we often lose it is at the managerial level. We lose it at the front line. So we talk about it in the boardroom, but we don't actually cascade the leadership and the culture throughout the organization. So it must be brought to life where everyone is talking about the core values. What do we stand for? I was just talking to a company the other day about a speaking engagement I'm doing for them. And they talked about the 4 core values. And these core values are so defined in everything they do. They have their pay structure based on it. They reinforce it. They talk about it. Everyone understands what it means. And it cascades throughout the entire organization. It's incredible. Like I was like, wow, I've never seen a company this large. We're talking over 100,000 employees. Wow. Really understand their key core values. But that's what you have to do. You have to have those values that are so ingrained in what you do. You have to talk about them. You have to reinforce them. And just as I talked about with Odell Beckham Jr., when you hear your values and your core principles reinforced and talked about when they're not prompted, that's how you know that your culture has come alive. And that's the key to leadership. So I believe what we do wrong is we don't make sure that everyone in the organization is living and breathing that culture. We don't really infuse it into our managers. And our managers usually aren't great leaders in order to really create that culture, in order to build that team, in order to have that team be inspired, encouraged, and valued. So you got to make sure that you're teaching your managers also how to lead. So it's something that we do with our Power of Positive Leadership program. We're passionate about developing leaders at every level of the organization. And I believe you can't just lead anymore in terms of at the macro level. You have to lead at the micro level. How are you coaching your team? So if you're the leader and you have 12 direct reports, you're not just leading them, you have to coach those 12 to be better leaders. Then those 12 leaders have to go coach and lead their direct reports. And those direct reports need to coach and lead their direct reports. As you do that down the entire organization, and you really talk about the culture and the values, and you lead in such a way with consistency. See, consistency is what creates culture. And you have consistency towards the values, ingraining the values, ingraining the beliefs and the action. That's how you get a great culture. So it's a step-by-step process. And where people get it wrong is they don't do it because it's hard. As we're talking about it, this is not easy. But once it becomes a way of life, once it becomes how you lead, once it becomes a part of your organization where everyone says, this is how we do things here, then you stand out. Then everyone around the world says, wow, there's something different about that company. And we know those companies, we talk about those companies, we celebrate those companies all the time. Almost every speaker uses those companies in their speech because we know there's something different. Think about Chick-fil-A. Let's have fun with Chick-fil-A for a second. You go to Chick-fil-A and you might get a fried chicken sandwich and you walk out of there like you just ate kale. And why is that? You feel like you ate something really healthy, and this is not the best Chick-fil-A because they got a lot of healthy things there. But you ate a fried chicken sandwich, but you walk out like, man, I feel so good because the culture is so strong because they said my pleasure. They didn't say no problem. They made you feel good, and you walk out of there feeling good. And so that's the power. That's the power of a culture and how it makes you feel.
I am absolutely stealing that from you. So, John, one of the things that we have seen over the last couple of years is that culture, like anything in business, has been impacted by the pandemic. And I want to talk a little bit now about some of the culture shifts that you've seen as a result of the impact the pandemic has had on business and environments around the country.
I've noticed that people are so happy to be together. So that's one great thing. Like I'm noticing at these events I'm going to now, people are a little like, whoa, like don't know how to act at first. But once they come together, they start to feel great. They've been lonely, they've been isolated, and they're really enjoying it. But there are other people that are a little like, whoa, wait a second. Like, I don't know how to engage anymore. I've sort of lost my in-person social skills and they have to re-engage. So it's been interesting culturally to watch, but I do believe we're moving forward in that direction. I believe culturally, a lot of people have been feeling the aftershock of the last 2 years of what happened. And so they are down, they are a little pessimistic. They are trying to find their footing. And I think that's why leadership is so essential now in terms of leading your teams forward. Talk about what you learned from the past. Don't live there, but really, have these sessions and ask your team, how did you go stronger during this time? What did you learn about yourself during this time? In my talk the other day, I asked the audience, what did you learn about yourself? A woman stood up and she said, I learned I was stronger than I thought. I was more resilient than I knew. Like, let's not just gloss over it. Let's talk about it, but let's heal it. And let's take those lessons and now move forward because we can't live in the past anymore. We've got to point our teams forward. And that's a message culturally that I've been sharing a lot and people are needing to hear because there are still some that are really stuck and having trouble finding that footing and going forward. So that's why leadership is essential right now. I'm noticing culturally, people are no longer willing to work right? For a company that may not have great values, that doesn't have a great culture. That's why we're seeing a resignation in many places, but we're not seeing a resignation in great cultures. We're not seeing a resignation in great organizations, which makes leadership and culture more important than ever. So culturally, we're seeing that. And I think people are had enough of Zoom conferences and Zoom, meetings right now. In a sense, I think they're wanting to engage more. I do believe we still can do the Zoom meetings. I think they're helpful. I think they're a great way to connect. There's so much that has been helpful during that time in terms of connecting your team and building relationships. But now it's about, okay, let's engage personally. Let's engage with a team and let's start becoming collaborative in that way again. So we're going to see more, I believe, a hybrid approach. We're going to see people working in the office a few days a week, working at home a few days a week. I've been hearing from a lot of companies that are starting to do that. And I think that's a great thing. If you can be productive and you can work in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday with your team and organization, and you can work from home Monday and Friday, to me, that is a great win-win for everyone. You see your team, you see your office, you're more productive when you're at home. You don't have that commute on a Monday and Friday. And I believe you're able to get more done, actually. So I think we also saw with businesses and organizations that people can be trusted, they can be empowered, they can get their jobs done, and they might even work more as a result of that.
Well, it's interesting, and I want to get to row the boat in just a second, but lean into what you just said. It's the pandemic has really redefined the matrix for productivity now and the ratio of in the office, out of the office, because people have had to be home and technology made a way for us to be productive and connect and all of these things. And you're right. I think in our audience as business owners, CEOs, or people aspiring to get in, you do find more efficiency with less action and moving around now because of this. But I'd like you to talk about the morale of a business that says, hey, Monday and Friday, don't come into the office. But you still get everything done. It does have a positive boost in team spirit and morale, does it not?
I think it has a great boost. And I think that morale is great because, okay, I'm working at home. I'm energized about that. I'm more productive. I see people in the office. I have that experience and people are happier. They're more excited. They're more energized. When they're there, they're not getting office burnout, right? They're not getting commute burnout. So I believe that it's great for morale, but seeing people is also great for morale. And that's why I think we can't just be remote all the time. I believe it's important to get together. But what we have found, and I've done a lot of this, I did a lot of team building with organizations and leaders and their teams during the pandemic. I did over 300 Zooms in 2020. It was crazy, like virtual keynote presentations, virtual workshops. Incredible how much I did during that time. And I learned a lot, but we had to engage people virtually. And as we did, people still connected. I did one of my favorite exercises, hero, hardship, and highlight. Who's your hero and why? What's a highlight in your life that you're proud of? And what's a hardship that you faced that made you who you are today? And I had a lot of teams do this virtually, and they really developed a stronger bond and relationship as a result of that exercise by doing that. So you have to be intentional, whether it's virtual or physical, to build the relationships and build the connection, to have a greater commitment. We need to be intentional as leaders to do that in good environments, in bad environments, in pandemics, in thriving times, and virtually or in person. We need to make sure that we're being intentional about developing the relationships, because purpose in relationships is what drives real motivation and morale. So the morale will only last so long. Okay, we're working from Monday and working from home Monday and Friday. Woo, we're all excited about it. That's going to be temporary. What are we doing to build the relationships and the engagement and the excitement and the mission and the passion that really drives everyone? That's really the key for the long haul.
Wow, such a great answer. Let's talk a little bit about Row the Boat. I mentioned it a moment ago, the latest book, latest offering from you that was written with Coach PJ Fleck. How is the message in this book different from previous books on leadership and particularly for a CEO?
Well, it's a book I wrote with PJ. And as we were writing the book, I realized, this is really his story. This is the Row the Boat story. This is his journey in building a culture. It's a great culture story. It's a great leadership story. It's not like my other books where I really infuse a lot of my own principles and my own stories in it and work with all the organizations and teams that I've worked with. For this one, I knew my job was to serve PJ and this story and teach people about row the boat. But I did want to tell the story of a coach who had to take over 2 programs that were not doing well and struggled, and how he turned both around to be successful. I think that's the story. How did he do it? Why did it work? And what are the keys to building a great culture? And you learn a lot in reading that. If you're a leader, if you're a coach, if you're a CEO, you're going to get some good ideas in reading this story. And PJ is very inspiring, filled with tons of resilience and grit. But there were many times he was doubted. There were many times he had to overcome a lot of challenges, a lot of naysayers, just as every organization and team must do. We're always going to have to overcome the energy vampires, the negativity, the naysayers in order to create our success. And as I always say, you don't create the world from the outside in. We create it from the inside out. So it's about rowing the boat, the people in your boat, the people on your team, rowing together, being a strong team and being resilient and having that grit. That's what makes a team successful. I wrote a lot about this in The Power of a Positive Team. If I was an organization, if I was a leader, I would say, okay, how do I build a stronger team? I believe The Power of a Positive Team has a lot of gems and takeaways and practices that are based on all my experiences working with some of the best teams on the planet. I think that's a read for a team. I think Row the Boat is a good read for a leader that says, how do I need to inspire my team? And man, I've got to turn this culture around. What should I do? You're going to get some good ideas from that.
Final question here. You note that failure is such a big part of success, but in reality, so many companies are afraid to fail or don't allow their teams to fail from time to time. And John, I just believe you can learn so much from failure. Not that you're intentionally trying to fail, but in failure, you learn a whole lot more about victory. What impact does failure have on growth?
Failure is not meant to define you. It's meant to refine you, to help you be all that you're meant to be. So if you look at your failures, you look at your challenges, they made you who you are today. When a tree gets pruned, it looks like it's been destroyed, but it hasn't been destroyed. The pruning is meant to help it grow more fully, to be all that it's meant to be. Well, your failures help you grow more fully, to be who you're meant to be. I think about my failures. I did not like going through them, but they ultimately made me who I am, and they made me stronger. They made me wiser, and they made me better. As an organization, we can't be scared of failure. Now, we don't want the big failures that will destroy the organization, right? So we have to be wary of them. That's why we have risk teams. It's why we have compliance teams. So we want to be smart. I say we want to be fearless, not reckless. So we want to be fearless, not reckless. We want to be able to move forward and know we're going to make mistakes along the way. But how do we learn from those mistakes? How do we grow from those mistakes? And how do we get better because of those mistakes? The mistakes I've made in business, whenever I went through them and I lost maybe 100,000 here, I lost another 150,000 on another deal, I tell my wife, well, it's good that we lost that because that means we won't lose $1 million going forward.
So, how'd that work out for you?
At first she's like, what, are you crazy? Like, that was a stupid decision. I'm like, yes, it was. I'm like, it was. Like, for instance, hey, I'm okay talking about my failures. I tried a positive cookie.
Right.
So great example. I did a positive cookie, my encouraging message. I said, all right, I'm going to partner with this couple. They came to me with the idea. They said they knew the cookie business. I believed in them. I thought they knew what it took to be successful. As we're going through the process, we made a great cookie. The problem was it cost too much to make that organic, great, positive cookie with a card that came with a positive message inside the wrapper, right? It was a whole bunch of stuff we had to do. I finally realized to actually make this work, you can't, because it wasn't scalable. It was not going to be scalable. So the fundamentals of the business just didn't work. At the end of the day, I had to walk away from that. And it was a great lesson to walk away. But I ultimately asked this of myself: do you want to make this succeed? Because I really, truly believe if I put everything into it, I would have found a way, lowered the cost, done all the things necessary to make it successful. But I asked the question, Like, is this what I'm really here to do? And it came to me very clearly. I did not create you, John, to make cookies and sell cookies. And I realized I'm going to go all in on training, on leadership. It was about developing people, not making cookies. And that's what I had to do. So it brought me closer to my purpose, closer to my passion, made it even stronger, became more convicted after that. And so I lost the money on the cookie, but then I have grown exponentially. Our training, our leadership training, we're doing them around the country now. We're developing leaders. We have trained the trainer program. That wouldn't have happened if I would have, stayed with the cookie and tried to succeed with it. I accepted the failure. And then I realized it wasn't for me. I didn't want to be the best in the world in the cookie business, but I was meant to develop leaders around the world. And it clarified that. Clarity leads to focus action. And the failure is what brought the clarity. So I think sometimes when people fail, they get down, they see it as a definition of who they are. I've never seen that. I always see it as an event. It's something that happened, but it's not me. I failed. Now what kind of success am I going to create in the future? And optimistic, positive leaders and entrepreneurs who think that way, they're the ones who have ultimately great success in the future. They have their failures along the way. Steve Jobs did. Almost every great leader did, right? But they took that failure, they turned it into an opportunity. And that is the key. So I took the cookie and turned it into great leadership training going forward. And now my wife does see, because there have been several decisions we had, should we get involved in this business? And we ultimately said, no, it seems like this, it seems like that. And sure enough, we saved a lot of money by not investing in those organizations and those companies, learning from our experience. A mistake's okay. A failure is okay. Just don't do it again.
All right. So I said last question. I got one more. Sue me. You've given us so much information this morning. I do want to ask on behalf of the audience, what's the single most impactful change someone can take right away to improve their leadership?
Wow. The single most impactful change they can improve in their leadership. They can focus on serving their team. You don't have to be great to serve, but you have to serve to be great. The minute you move from me to we, and you say, how can I make my team better? How can I help them improve? Maya Angelou said, you can't be much of a leader if all you see is yourself. A leader sees greatness in others. Start seeing the greatness in others. See their potential and see it as your job to serve their growth, to serve their future, and to help them become all they're meant to be. That's when you become a great leader.
That is so good. Were the cookies at least good?
Clay, they were really good. They were actually really good. It was disappointing that we couldn't make it ultimately work at the larger scale. But as I said, it led to something better. Just not a cookie that I could eat.
Oh, John, thank you so much. Such great insight, man. And you've done so much over the years in the way of motivating people, and being able to dialogue with you like this has been really enjoyable. And I'm sure our audience has gotten it. And this is the first time you're back here and on the other side of it now. So it really is good to have that dialogue with you, my friend.
Hey, thanks, Claire. I'm glad that they upgraded to greater talent, bringing you in, replacing me. So great job with that. I enjoyed being on this side of it, and great work that you're doing.
I'd also like to thank all of you, our guests, for joining me this morning, and thank our sponsors for making this episode possible. Please join me next month when I will be speaking with the CEO of the tech-enabled talent development company, Disruption Advisors, and one of the top 10 business thinkers in the world, as named by Thinkers 50, Ms. Whitney Johnson. See you then.